Welcome to the lesson on sanctions. One of the tools the referees have to keep control of the match is sanctions. Sanctions come in a variety of forms and may be used to warn or penalize an individual or team. Warnings may be given verbally or with a yellow card, and a warning is just that, a warning. A penalty is administered with a red card, and it results in a loss of rally point awarded to the opposing team. We will discuss more about the sanctions available to the officials, but first, let's discuss how best to keep the match from escalating to the point where sanctions are required. Our duty as officials is to help facilitate the match for the teams. This means not just reacting to what occurs on the court, but also being proactive and preventive to help the teams abide by the rules. There are a number of preventive techniques you can use before, during, and after a match to keep the team and your crew out of trouble. Before the match begins, check the facility carefully. Be sure there is a continuous center line and hash marks to delineate the service zone. Move the team benches if they are not located further away from the net than the attack line. Look for obstructions that can be moved out of the player's way. Ask host administration to keep spectators, especially parents with video cameras, an appropriate distance from the court. If an object or spectator cannot be moved, then be prepared and know how to handle the situation if play is impacted by the object or person. You and your R2 should prompt coaches to turn in rosters and lineups before the deadline. Don't wait until the deadline arrives and then ask, because at that point a sanction is required. It may be helpful to remind the coach of the receiving team to submit their lineup before they take the court for their 6 minutes of warm-up time, since the deadline will arrive while they are using the court and the coach may be otherwise engaged at that time. When you've got the lineup, check it over. Look for duplicate or missing numbers, and be sure the numbers listed are the same as those on the roster. If you find a mistake and the 2-minute deadline hasn't yet passed, return the lineup to the coach and have them fix the error. The coach will appreciate your help, and you'll be an ally before the match even begins. If the error is found after the 2-minute deadline has passed, tell the coach the problem and tell them their options to fix it. Check players for illegal equipment and uniforms, especially compliant uniforms if a libero is used. If a team's libero uniform is illegal or non-compliant, give them as much notice as possible that the player will not be allowed to play, so that if they can make the jersey legal or compliant, they have the time to do so. Too many times, officials notice the libero jersey right after they have climbed up on the stand, or worse, sometime well into the match. Have players remove illegal equipment in warm-ups to help prevent delay sanctions later. There are plenty of opportunities to be preventive even when the match is already underway. When a team is close to an alignment fault, warn them. Warn them early in the match when you see a problem. But remember that an illegal alignment fault is still an offense that needs to be called. If the team is obviously out of alignment, call it. A warning is not always necessary. If you have warned the team when they are close and they do not heed your warning, call it when they are out of alignment. When it comes to alignment, warn if possible and call when necessary. If a player is standing on a line when they are lined up before play, warn them to step entirely onto the court. Try and avoid calling an alignment fault for having a player standing off the court. Also, sometimes the servers are unaware of how close they are to the sideline extended, or service hash mark. By rule, the server must serve between the outside edges of the serviced hash mark. If the player serves the ball from a position that is very close to a fault, then before they serve again, warn them to step in to keep them from committing a foot fault. You as the R1 are likely the only person in a position to see that particular fault, and making that call can be a tough sell. That call can be prevented altogether by a helpful direction from the R1 before the serve. Do not give the same type of warning for a foot fault on the end line, which is a more obvious fault. Before each serve, the R1 should scan the court looking for possible screening on the serving team. Remember that a screen is an action by the serving team that is meant to block the receiving team's view of the contact for serve and flight of the ball. We look for a number of factors, such as players standing immediately in front of a server, a group of players standing close at the net, and a serve with a low trajectory directly over the players committing the potential screen. Many times, this potential fault isn't noticed by the R1 until the receiving team complains about it. Be mindful to watch for screening, and when you see a potential screen, warn the players involved or the captain. The receiving team should be able to adjust by taking a step to see the server and the ball. But if the serving team players move correspondingly to continue blocking the view of the receiving team, then you likely have a screening fault that needs to be called. The R2 is in charge of bench control and administering substitution and timeout requests. With these responsibilities comes a great need for preventive officiating. Even though this module is focused on the R1, let's take a moment here to talk about how the R2 can be preventive during the match. After a timeout has concluded, the teams should return to the court. If they aren't moving, then the R2 should move toward the teams and prompt them to return to the floor. The R2 can help keep the match moving by knowing information that is valuable to the coaches. If a coach asks how many timeouts they have left, answer them quickly. If you have to refer to the score sheet or ask your scorer, then that takes time away from the game. The same is true for substitutions. If a team is making a lot of substitutions, keep track of how many they have used. During timeouts, take a moment to review the score sheet to update yourself on how many timeouts and substitutions each team has used. If a coach makes a request for something you know they don't have, such as a third timeout, deny the request and tell them why quickly. If their action doesn't delay the match, then it's best not to assess them a delay sanction. Between sets, step out to the right-hand side of the court to make sure that the team on your right goes counterclockwise around the court. Watch the area where the teams are in traffic while changing sides. Make sure the coaches retrieve their lineups from the scoring table and facilitate the collection of the lineups as the 1-minute deadline approaches. Check the lineups for errors just as you did before the match began. Sometimes sanctions for conduct can even be avoided by using preventive officiating. When a coach approaches you as an R2 or a captain approaches you as an R1, listen to their question. Anticipate what they will ask based on what just occurred, but do not assume you know what they will ask and begin answering it before they open their mouth. Sometimes coaches have no questions and just want to be heard. As long as they don't cross a line in their comments, you can feel free to listen without offering a response. But if they ask a question, address it. Never ignore a coach. Having a strong knowledge of the rules will help you prepare your answer using the language of the rules. Part of preventive officiating is simply knowing the rules. Spending time reading the rule book and case book to become familiar with the language and interpretation is your biggest means of preparing for all situations in a match. Lastly, when you are approached with a question, or if you have to intervene in a coach's or player's behavior, keep your calm. Focus on the problem, not on the person. Even a smile can be a disarming tool when used appropriately. After the match, a quick exit strategy is a good idea. Even if the match wasn't a contentious one, it's wise to collect your belongings and exit the gym speedily. Keep a professional appearance if you have interactions with players, coaches, or host administration after the match. If the match is contentious, then have a quicker exit route planned with your crew and minimize interactions with participants and spectators. When your crew has convened, conduct your debrief in an out-of-the-way location. Move away from the scorer's table and the court. Be aware of who might be around you and do not discuss match specifics if anyone is close by. Even with all of our preventive tools, sometimes sanctions must be administered. Sanctions fall under the sole authority of the R1, but the R2 may request sanctions from the R1. The R1 should honor sanction requests from the R2 even if the R1 does not know what the sanction is for. Rule 9.9 outlines when an unnecessary delay sanction is appropriate. When you can be preventive, do so. But if a team delays the match, then administer to them an unnecessary delay. Sometimes an unnecessary delay is the lesser of two evils for a coach. For example, if the R2 recognizes, whistles, a substitution request that the coach realizes is incorrect, then the coach may opt to remove the substitution and be charged an unnecessary delay instead. If you must assess an unnecessary delay sanction as the R1, whistle and call the captain to the stand, display the sanction, and state the sanction to the captain. Remember, unnecessary delays are administrative sanctions only. Although the yellow card might be used, there is no requirement that the head coach be seated. However, when a second unnecessary delay occurs during the same set, a point loss of rally is awarded to the opposing team. Remember that delays do not carry over from set to set, but a team or player that is guilty of repeated delays in a match can be sanctioned with an unsporting conduct warning or penalty. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try to prevent misconduct, a player or coach simply crosses a line. Determining where that line is and administering the appropriate sanction can be a challenge, even for experienced referees. Let's start with the rulebook. Rule 12.2 outlines examples of unsporting conduct for coaches and players. The categories for unsporting conduct are classified as minor, serious, and flagrant. An example of minor misconduct is demonstrating disgust with an official's calls. An example of serious misconduct is swearing at a member of the other team or a member of the officiating crew. An example of flagrant misconduct is physical aggression or threatening. If a player on the court must be given a verbal warning or unsporting conduct sanction, whistle and call the player over, display the sanction, and state the sanction directly to that player. If a player or coach on the bench earns a sanction, whistle and call the captain over, display the sanction, and state the sanction to the captain. Unlike unnecessary delay sanctions, conduct sanctions are progressive throughout the whole match. Remember that you as the official have the power of your whistle and your words. You may deliver verbal warnings to players before you reach for a card. However, if verbal warnings don't seem to be doing the job of controlling the teams, or if an individual's actions need to be addressed more severely, then your cards are your best tools to help you. Watch the following 3 videos and decide how you would address the player's behavior. Would you administer a verbal warning, a yellow card, or something more punitive? In this video, watch the left front player on the right side of the court after the play. The action of hitting the ball under the net in frustration is becoming more typical in the high school game. This player goes a little further and slams the ball down toward the other side. The referee's decision here to yellow card the player is probably appropriate. In this video, watch the server, player number 5, at the end of the rally. One of the examples of unsportsmanlike conduct in the rulebook is baiting or taunting people involved with the contest. This player is clearly taunting spectators in the stands. Although we don't know what events have led to this interaction from earlier in the match, we cannot allow this type of behavior. At minimum, a yellow card is necessary, but depending on previous events in the match, a red card might be appropriate instead. This action the officials must take against the player may elicit unwanted behavior from the spectators, but the referees cannot concern themselves with the spectators' behavior unless it becomes unruly or disruptive to the match. At that point, the referee shall suspend the match until host administration resolves the situation. In this video, watch the server at the end of the rally. The frustrated player kicks the ball to the other side, and it errantly hits the R1 stand. The server looks contrite and appears to apologize to the R1. The referee administers a penalty, which is the equivalent of a red card in high school. It earns a point for the other team. You can see how the captain reacts to defend his player and how all the players begin to crowd the referee stand near the end of the discussion because they feel the penalty is unjust. For this player's action, a verbal warning or perhaps a yellow card warning would have been a more appropriate response. This concludes the 5th lesson about the first referee. Please mark this lesson complete and continue on to the R1 quiz. Thank you.